I don't know if you'll give me that when I finish, but I'm delighted to be able to stand before you this evening, especially at this opportune time, being a Republican. Isn't it great to be a Republican? President Trump is in his 200-plus days. And look at the differences and the changes that have happened in our country. And I love to see someone who says, this is what we're going to do, and then he does it. I love to see someone that says, we need to concentrate on these things. And I think the thing that appeals to me the most about dealing with President Trump and watching his policies is the fact that he's an outsider. He looks at things in a different perspective. He thinks that if we've operated this way for so long, why don't we change? Because maybe what we've done is not been working. And I respect and support the food and the way he operates this country. And I'm grateful to be an American. And I'm grateful to have him as our president. I feel the same way about Rankin County. This is an important place to us. I call it my home county because we actually have more folks that work in Rankin County than we do in any county in the country. So we love this area. It's important to us. We do a lot of business here, and it has been good to us. As I look back, I can remember that Rankin County also is kind of the not only epicenter of the Republican Party, but really is the beginnings of the Republican Party in the state of Mississippi. As a young man, I remember a man named Kirk Fordyce showing up and getting on the scene. He not being a politician, but Rankin County is the place that supported him. Rankin County is the place that put him into the gubernatorial race and elected him. So Rankin County has wonderful opportunities. I love to be in a place where success happens, educationally, financially, of having a positive attitude. And I'm delighted to be here with you this evening. Now let me tell you, I'm going to come at you not as a politician because I don't claim to be one. I can remember the only political events that I've ever been involved in was when I was selected to be on the IHL, which we call the College Board. A few people came up to me and said, Tommy, said, you're not an educator, you're certainly not a politician. What good are you going to do on the institutions of higher learning? I said that also. But getting involved and having a different perspective on things taught me a lot, because that's frankly been what we did in our business. When I finished at the University of Southern Mississippi, we started I was involved in the tire business. My father was an attorney, and fortunately he was a pretty good attorney because he needed to be to support his poor tire business. I was finishing up at the University of Southern Mississippi and getting a master's in business, which I still have not finished, and was going on to law school. And I wanted to come back and work in the family business because I loved the tire business. And I can remember one Friday evening my father saying, son, if you want to go to law school, you need to be a lawyer because the business won't be here in 3 years. And I said, well, that's probably a sign that I might want to stay and work. So I went to work, and we had a bar. I was the 6th employee of our little operation. And unfortunately, I found out that we could make payroll for 5 people. Number 6 didn't get a paycheck. So I went about a year without a paycheck, but luckily I lived at home and Mom and Dad took care of me. But we worked, and we had fun. And as we grew, I learned a lot of things. One is that I'm not that important. The culture of the people is what is important. The people that you want to work with, that want to work with you. Now you have to have a vision, and you have to have that culture. And if you can apply that culture, then you have opportunities for growth. After about 3 or 4 years, my brother came into business. His requirement for coming into business was that we had a location in Jackson because he didn't want to move back to Columbia. So we opened up, and I can remember our first little place was on Priester Drive off of Highway 80 in a little rental building, and that's how we operated. Now people talk about you having the American dream back then. My American dream was to make payroll on Friday. That was where we stood. But we grew and we developed and we got better and better. Coming to Rankin County frankly saved our little company because there was a lot of business here. There was a lot of opportunities and it worked well for us. And we've kind of taken that philosophy and that belief as we have grown and be involved. I still work every day. We work hard. My brother and I are out there each and every day. And luckily, we work with a great group of people, because we learned a long time ago that the word I doesn't really mean anything. It's we. And as long as we do well, then everybody is successful. And today we are so blessed, I can't even stand before you and think of having these many folks that we work with and having these many opportunities. I was thinking when I walked in the door, as we've gotten larger, people have come in to interview us and talk and ask. We had a reporter from Forbes magazine in about 4 or 5 years ago that had kind of come upon us and wanted to talk about things. And I can remember Jim and I sitting in my office and the reporter saying, "Tell me about your DEI policy." I was starting to say, "Well, we told him, my brother Jim said we have a very good DEI policy." And I looked at him and I said, "What are you thinking?" And he says, "Tommy, if you get a DWI, you no longer work for us." I said, "Jim, she means DEI." And they looked at me and they said, "I don't know what that is, but we don't have one." And that's kind of the way we operate today. We are a very loose group. We hire the best, and those folks continue to do well. Now I can pick out, and of course we've already picked on Jim Richards. Jim Richards runs our KLLM group, our Frozen Food Express group. He runs $1 billion company. When we purchased KLLM, Jim was number 3 or 4 there, and frankly was the only one that understood what a truck was. And I said, "Jim, you're going to be the new leader." And we worked, got to know each other well. We still know each other well. But today, Jim Richards is the best trucker in the country, and he lives in Jackson, Mississippi, and I'm proud of him for that. And I can go on and on and on. Now again, going back to when they asked me to serve on the college board, I had no educational experience, but I did have something that I thought was unique. I had a different perspective of things. I had a different idea about the way things might be done. And within a year or two of that 9-year assignment, I got pretty involved in the finances. And I began to say, why do we do these things? I took all of our bond issues, and at that time, the state of Mississippi, through the IHL, owned about $1 billion. And that was for dorms, buildings, sporting facilities. And I looked at all the different bond issues. And we had some at 3% and some at 6.5% and everything in between. And each university was paying their interest on these bonds and paying them down. And I said, you know, in our business, it's kind of hard to see a 3 to 3.5% differential just in interest rates. So why don't we take these interest rates and let's go redo every bond we have, because at that time our municipal rate was 2.95%. So we took all of that and we said, let's bring it together. Let's hire attorneys, let's spend a couple of $1 million, and let's change the way that all these bond issues are done. And you know, when we calculated that, and with the support of the IHL board, our savings was over $100 million. And I appreciate that, but I guess the real question I should be asking is why we didn't do it years before. And those are the type of things that a different perspective has. I know when we were looking at the insurance policies, we have 8 institutions, and the University of Mississippi Medical Center being 9. There were 9 different insurance policies. Everybody had different coverages, different agencies, everything in the world. So I said, why don't we see if we can save money that way? We hired an insurance firm that did this. They took bids from everybody. Our first savings was over $12 million that year, and it's gone on every year after that. Now, I will have to admit, I probably made 9 other insurance agencies in the state, not as many. But the point is, our job was to save money, because those dollars go into education. And even when it came to academics, we started looking at how many students were graduating in this specific major. And I got to looking, and we had a program called a Doctorate of Musical Education. Musical theory, a doctorate of musical theory. And I thought, you know, I don't know anything about the program. But I got to say, how many graduates did we have from this particular university? we'd had one graduate in 5 years. And yet, in talking, we had 3 professors who were fully endowed and ready to teach if somebody showed up. But the question is could we not take those funds and that money and go put it into other fields that perhaps we would have more needs for graduates, that we could do those things? And it's simple things that you get involved in as you look. Now let me tell you, in the field of education and at the IHL, I have the highest respect for the leaders of these institutions. They love it, they work hard, they want to do the right thing. And we educate people for about 75% below what the Southeastern average is. So we're doing a great job. We're also doing a great job in quality, because our students can compete against anybody's. And I am grateful for that, and I'm grateful for the institutions that serve our state. Now, every year we graduate about 24,000 students in that, and I'm delighted to be able to see that. But you know, the thing I guess and I love going to graduations. I get to see the students come across, and I can almost find their parents when you see them coming. And you think about first-time families that have a college graduate, and all the good things that are happening in our state. But yet, when I look at those 24,000, I get to wonder how many of them will stay in our state. In our organization, we hire about 50 Mississippi University graduates a year. We've been doing it for several years, and we hire from all the different colleges and institutions. But when I meet and talk to these people, and then we hire someone from Auburn, A&M, and all over, so there'll be about 100 people in our gatherings. And we'll talk to them. We'll say, are you interested in administration or sales or whatever you're wanting to get into? And what is your plan for moving forward? And as I talk to them, I get to learning, particularly with our Mississippi graduates. I say, where would you like to work? Where do you want to end up? And I'll sit there, and then I get the usual answers. Nashville, Atlanta, Austin. I've never, to this day, had someone tell me that they want to go to our store in Greenwood, or they want to go to Jackson, or they want to go to Hattiesburg, Columbia. They all have different dreams. And what kills me is the fact that half of the graduates of those 24,000 students that we graduate, they won't be in our state in 3 years. They will be gone. Now that starts meaning something when we look at ourselves as a state and how are we doing and the opportunities that we could have to do better. I had an interesting event 2 weeks ago. Jamie Dimon, who is the CEO of J.P. Morgan Chase, came to visit at a symposium in Jackson. And of course, Jamie Dimon not only runs the largest bank in the United States, he's probably the most influential banker in the world. And lucky for me, he was the keynote speaker, and I was kind of the minor act at the end. But I had the opportunity to visit with him. And let me tell you, he's prepared. He was doing a bus trip. He started in Arkansas, and he was coming in, and he did Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia. And that was his weekly trip. He was going to spend a day in every state. And as we talked, he started asking questions. He said, you know, why is Mississippi's population behind the Southeastern average? And I got to visit with him. And you know, it's interesting that we have pockets where we're doing extremely well. Obviously, DeSoto County. Obviously, Rankin County, the coast. And then we have population areas in our state that are declining. And they are serious concerns when we look at the Delta, when we look at Southwest Mississippi. So how are we doing in population growth? Another question he said, and he asked me, he said, tell me about why only half of Mississippi adults that are eligible to work are working. And I said, that's a pretty big indictment of our state. And I assured him it was nothing to do with Mississippi culture or Mississippi work ethic, because it's not. Mississippians work harder and frankly will work more than anybody else. And he said, why is it that way? And in thinking, I almost want to say, and this probably isn't the most popular thing to report, it has to do with what people are paid. I learned a long time ago that if somebody has a good paying job, then they have enthusiasm and they have a reason for being able to move forward. They can look at the American dream. And that American dream means that they have opportunity in their life. They can raise their family. And if they have that good paycheck, they're healthier, they're happier, they live long, all those things we talk about in our state. And as Michael was talking about, they also look at the community because they're vested in that community. They're a taxpayer. And they want proper services because they're putting their money in it. And I can assure you, in talking to the different mayors that are here, if you don't provide proper garbage service or police protection or cultural things in your city, you're not going to be lasting long, are you? People demand services, and I love that because that gives them a spirit of community. They are participatory in their community. Now, that's what we need, and that's kind of the things that we ought to be talking about. We're graduating a lot of folks. Our junior colleges are probably the best in the country. We're doing workforce things that we never have done. And for that, I am very complimentary because that is what's happening. And we're seeing industry come into our state more and more. And as I look back, you know, the Republicans have only really been in charge of our state government for about 20 years. And I compliment highly Governor Barber, Governor Bryant, Governor Reeves. They've each applied their particular method of loving our state and growing it. And I'm excited about that, and I thank them for that. I'm particularly impressed with what the state legislature has done because we passed important conservative things that make our state better. This reduction of the income tax, of having enough money for proper infrastructure, of being able to be concerned about safety and crime. Those are the things that conservative, good leadership does. And we have been blessed with that. So I am very appreciative of where we are going and how we're headed. The different questions, though, that come was another one. We were talking about Arkansas because he had just come from there. And the question was, Arkansas has about the same population as Mississippi, has about the same workforce participation problem as Mississippi, but yet they have 5 public corporations that are in the Fortune 500 based in Arkansas. And according to Mr. Diamond, we have none. And I said, that's very true. But you know, Mississippi is a little different in certain things. I'll tell you, I had an opportunity to visit with Sarah Huckabee Sanders one time, and I didn't know her and she didn't know me, but then I found out she did know. I went to visit with her. We were just talking and chatting. I introduced myself, and she said, I know who you are, Mr. Duff. You have 882 employees in the state of Arkansas. And I said, probably. And she said, let's talk about how you're going out more. Let's talk about what other businesses you can put in our state. And I stopped and I said, this lady really learned from Donald Trump. She really understands things because she approaches it in a different manner. And instead of just having little nice conversations, she was to the point. She wanted to know what our action plan was and how we could grow business in her state. I like that. That's what's important about doing things. You know, we have an interesting state. I had a banker that came in about 2 or 3 years ago, and we had a nice visit with brother and myself and the 2 bankers, and they were top 20 bankers, CEOs. And they came in and said, you know, of all the states we do business in, Mississippi is the most unique. And I was almost scared for what he was going to say after that. And he said, no, he said, it's the highest compliment. He says, we have about 30 states that we do business in. And he said, Mississippi has the highest number of private corporations that do over $1 billion a year in business. And I said, you know, I really never thought of that. And so my mind went quickly over to go and frankly started Rankin County with Ergon folks. What a contribution they are to this area. In fact, I had a great visit last week at Ergon. And it was funny in the 2 companies that we talked about what we can both do for our state. Because that's the attitude that Ergon has. How do we grow our state? I can sit here and I can go over to Laurel and see Howard. I can go to Philadelphia and I can be able to look over there and see the Gates Construction Group. I can go and see Taylor Energy in Louisville, Mississippi. And I get to see all these companies, and then I can think of Ceasefire in Jackson. We have 6 different private corporations in our state doing over $1 billion a year. Now, why? Because as that banker said, that doesn't go on in Alabama or Georgia. He says a business hits $1 billion in sales, he says they've sold it. And I said, and when they sell it, it goes to Dallas or New York or Atlanta, doesn't it? He says, yes, it does. I think the native love of those private corporations is really important for our state. But you know, even though we don't have Fortune 500 companies domiciled here, we sure have a lot of them working here. I can go down the coast and see Chevron, and Chevron's largest refinery in the United States. I can go next door to Huntington Ingalls and see one of the largest shipyards in the world. I see Toyota, I see Nissan. Now we can announce Amazon coming to Jackson, to this area. What a great thing that is. We also have Compass coming into Meridian. And we're doing all of these wonderful things. And I sometimes say, is that enough? Because I always worry about the future. You know, it's almost like we're driving down the road and Mississippi's going 50 miles an hour. Now, I will tell you, several years ago, we weren't doing 50, we were doing about 40 miles an hour. But our southeastern state friends, they were doing 50 miles an hour. And we were getting a little further behind each year. Now, I'm pleased to report that we have stepped on the gas pedal. And we're up to doing what they're doing. I think the difference is they're probably 7 to 10 miles ahead of us. So what are we going to do for the future? I learned a long time ago in business that you're either growing or you're stagnant. And if you're stagnant, things aren't going to be doing well for you. You're going to lose business, you're going to lose people, and you're going to go down that decline. And I have literally, between Jim and me, have bought hundreds of businesses that have been in that situation. What do you do as a state? How do you grow? We're doing great in education. I am so proud of our educational advances and what we're doing, and I give great tribute to the leaders of Mississippi for doing that. We are doing great as a state as far as our economic activity, but there are pockets of our state that are just desperate for assistance, desperate for help. How can we continue to grow our state? What do we need to do? Where do we need to be? Now, those are the topics that I think we need to address as a state. And those are topics that really occur in this room. Now, I'm not going to stand up here and tell you that a bigger business is a better business, because that's probably not a very true statement. We have some of the best private businesses in our state because we're sitting here growing and doing. People with 10 employees, what can we do as a state to help them have 11 or 12? What can we help to grow that community? I don't know much about economic development, but I have learned a few things. I'll tell you, in our business, we are constantly on the prowl for helping our suppliers and our customers talk about Mississippi. I can remember 10 years ago playing golf with the president of Yokohama Tire out of Tokyo. And in talking and visiting with him while we were both playing, I was going to say I was trying, he was doing really well, but we were talking about it, and I said, we need more of your products, because we were Yokohama Tire's largest customer. And he says, you do need more products. We need to build more plants in Japan. And I said, no, that's not what I'm asking. We need plants built here. Your largest market is here. Your largest customers are here. Why not come here? And he says, that's a good idea. And I said, and then he said, where do I need to go? And I said, you need to go to Mississippi. And I can remember him standing on the 15th green and looked at me and said, where is Mississippi? and that's a true statement. But he knows where it is now. They put a plant in Westport, Mississippi. They have 800 folks working there that have great jobs, and it is great for those areas of Westport. The same identical thing happened with Continental Tire. We're a large purchaser of Continental. They needed more tires. They needed more supply. And in talking to them, instead of building another plant in Europe, it needed to be here. And it needed to be in Mississippi. And today in Clinton, Mississippi, there's over 700 folks that work in that plant. And they're well paid. It's a great corporate citizen. That's the type of growth that frankly comes from visiting and talking with what you do in the room. How you network, how you do. I kind of call it an ecosystem of development. Can you think of the many companies that exist around Chevron, around Huntington Ingalls, around all the businesses that we have in our state that are suppliers to them, customers that do all of these things? That's what we need to be doing as a state, growing our small businesses. We need to do it through workforce development. We need to do the things in regulation that make it easy to do business in this state. People have asked me all the time, why do we live in Mississippi and do that? And I guess after 3 or 4 years, Jim and I looked at each other and said, I guess we live in Mississippi because we like it. And I want to tell you, it was important. I can remember a time that we were really considering moving, and it was frankly over tort reform. Now, when you're driving down the road with 4,000 semis, and when you're selling all the tires and brake triggers, you probably have some liability problems. And I will always be grateful to Governor Barber for passing tort reform, because he had the foresight to be able to do these things. And that's what we all need, is the ability to be able to compete. Now listen, I have lived the American dream, and I live it every day. And I am grateful for that. But I'm really grateful, to be honest with you, to be a citizen of this state. It's been good to me. We try to be good citizens. As we grow and expand, it's like meeting with the Earthline folks. It was really about what can we do to help our state, not how each of us can grow and get a little wealthier because of it. That's the kind of conversations you want to have. That's what good corporate citizens are. That's what we want to be. And I'm going to tell you that the challenges that we have as a state, that's a challenge that we all need to excel, because we're all in it together. We have got to get our car up to 60 miles an hour. We've got to be able to stay with our southeastern peers. We really need to overtake them. We can do that if all of us work together, if that's our goal, if that's our desire. We're handling the education, we're handling the infrastructure, we're handling it through our legal system. We're doing all the right conservative things to be successful. It's time for us to be. I want to tell you, as I discuss my vision, I want you to understand that I'm doing it frankly because this is what we want. We want our state to progress. It means everything to us. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it very much. I look forward to visiting and getting to know many of you. I appreciate your time.